Hello, I'm Alexandria, and I'm a data visualization analyst with SAS. In today's video, I'm answering the question, can we use one filter in SAS Visual Analytics to filter multiple data sources in the same VA report? The answer to that question is yes. This question is actually very near and dear to my heart because I recently experienced this problem myself. And I also recently found a solution, which is why I'm going to help you all out today. SAS Visual Analytics does have the capability to use multiple data sources in the same VA report. However, things can get a little tricky when you want to interact or link the different data sources together. For example, let's say you had a filter in your VA report that uses data from table A, and you have a report object that uses data from table B. Right off the bat, this filter cannot filter this report object. My old way of working around this was to either set or merge data sources together. But over time, and if you have multiple data sets to do this with, the data set that you're combining them all to will get large. But again, hey, we're using SAS. It's not going to be a problem with SAS because that's what SAS is made for. It's made to handle big data. However, from the human perspective, things can be a lot more manageable. And that's why I suggest mapping data. In this instance of SAS Visual Analytics that I'm using for this demo, it's on release 8.5.1. Also, the data sources that I'm using for this demo come from the SAS Help library, so you all have access to these data sources as well. The first data source I want to mention is US_data, and that's where I'm getting this population bar chart here on the left-hand side, as well as this filter on the top left of name of state or region. The other data source I'm using is from the zip code dataset, and that's where I get this geomap on the right-hand side of zip codes. As you see here, let's use this filter. And this filter has an action between both of these report objects, the geomap as well as the bar chart. And you see that this filter is actually working for the bar chart. Again, these two have the same data sources. But by default, like I mentioned earlier, it does not have a successful interaction with this geomap. And that's because these two are using different data sources. So we need to map them together. So let's go to the data pane. Let's hit action. And also too, you can do this for either data source. So let me actually do it for zip code. Let's go to action and let's go to map data. Hit enable data mapping. And by default, a relationship will pop up. Usually it's not going to be the right one that you're looking for, at least for my cases. So if it's not, you can go and see what options you have, which are all the variables for either data source. And whichever data source that you're using, that you went and hit the action and hit data mapping from, that's going to be your source data set. And then the other one will be your target. So let's start with my target in this case. The reason why I'm doing this is because I like to start with the variable that's actually the filter or whatever the interaction is that I want to use. So in this case, since we have a filter that uses the US_data, I'm going to get that variable. It is name of state or region, right? That's the filter that we want to work for the zip code data set. So I have that selected. So now the question is, what variable from the zip code data has the same values of the name of state or region? Where if I filtered by the name of state or region, it would also filter the zip code data. So because I have looked at this data for a little bit, I know that the variable that I'm looking for is state name. And again, the reasoning for this was when I was looking through this is, I was looking for the variable that has the same observations pretty much and the same values, or at least similar values to what I'm going to be filtering by. So let's use state name, and that's it. A few things I do want to mention is you can add additional variables to map by, and I'll show you why that's significant in a little bit. Also, I want to mention that the variables that you map together, they have to have the same formatting. So let's say I had two data variables that I wanted to map together. They have to have the same date format. So one couldn't have a date 9 format and the other one a month, day, year format. Also, if I wanted to have another mapping, name of state or region, I couldn't do that right off the bat. Once you map a variable, it cannot be remapped. If you wanted to use that variable over and over again, you would have to create a duplicate of those variables in your data set. So let's hit OK. And you see here, since I didn't change the filter, it was still on California. It's working like it should now. So let me show you something else real quick. Let's clear this filter. Okay. Now let's go back to the data mapping that we just did. Okay. Map data. Let's say instead of the state name that we use from the zip code data, let's use something else. Let's use city. I'm just using something else. Do you think this will work or not? Do you think this filter will still work or not? No, the filter would no longer work. And the reasoning for that is because California, that's not a value. There's no California city as a value for the city variable. When I use the name of state or region filter and it filters to California, since there's no value for California in the city variable, there's nothing to display. So again, that's why you have to make sure you're not just picking a random variable to map to another variable. You have to make sure they have either similar or exactly the same values for it to be beneficial. All right, so let me go back. Let me change that to what it should be again. And now, again, the filter is working like it should. We have that California being filtered for zip code. One last thing I do want to show you. Let's look at the US_ data. And I wanted to show you that you don't have to go to both places to map it. Once you map it in one of the data sources, it's going to show up in the other one as well. The only difference is the source and the target. It's going to change depending on what your source data set is and what your target data set is. So in this case, the roles are reversed, but it works just the same. Also, something I want to point out is if you had more than 2 data sources in your same VA report, you would have several options to do data mapping. Something else that I did want to mention is that this report object does not have to be a GeoMap. It can be any type of report object in order to get mapping to work. I just used the GeoMap because it was more visually appealing for the data set that I had. But again, it can be a scatter plot, line chart, heat map, whatever you want it to be in order to get that data mapping to work. So now when someone asks you,
can I use one filter to filter multiple data sources in a SAS VA report?
You can tell them yes. You can also show them how. For more information, please check out the links below. Also, feel free to comment any questions that you have. Be sure to also comment about how much you love the video. And last but not least, please subscribe to the SAS Users channel on YouTube for more tips like this. Until next time.